Hey there, and welcome to the Office of the IT Guy, the show where we celebrate the people and talk about the technology that's changing our world. I am your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and my mission here is to share a love for open source and help build a stronger community. I'm so thankful that you tuned in because the office is now open. Hey there, and welcome to the IT Guy Show. I'm your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and I'm really excited because this is episode number 6. And took a short break there, family vacations, fixed some streaming infrastructure, rebuild my home lab, all the usual things that us nerds do. So really excited to be back with you. I'm currently, as you're watching this, I'm currently prepping for an on-site meeting at work. So that's kind of why we pre-recorded this episode, but really glad that you joined us, whether you're live, I guess quasi-live, or whether you're catching this episode after the fact. Really glad that you joined in. So today we're going to be talking about ephemeral environments, and this is something that I really fell in love with over the last few months. It's something I didn't really get to enjoy as a systems administrator, and so I met Natalie at Kansas City DevOps Days, or I guess DevOps Days KC, just a few months ago, and so we chatted, and and she gave an interesting talk at DevOps Days, and I really connected with it as a systems administrator. I won't spoil anything, but really glad you tuned in. And with that said, let me bring on my guest today. Natalie, welcome to episode 6 of the IT Guy Show.
Hey, Eric, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on your show. And as I've told you, I really am a big fan of it.
Well, I appreciate that. 5 episodes in, and half of them I think had to do with DevOps Days Kansas City. So
yeah, well, that's awesome. No, that was a great conference. Lots of great content. I certainly learned a lot and met a lot of great people, many of which who have been on your show since.
Yeah, it was funny. It's probably the first conference I've been to in close to 5 years where I was actually an attendee. I got to sit in the audience and take notes. It was unbelievably refreshing.
Oh yeah, just the whole scope of like what the speakers covered. I thought that there was really something for everyone. I feel like just like every stretch from things like development on an IC level to infrastructure to like adding value, there was it was really a great lineup, super comprehensive. Yeah, definitely learned a lot.
Yeah, it was great to get out in the community and connect with folks again. So it's not by mistake that I wore my KC DevOps Days shirt today. So if you do have a DevOps community in your area, definitely go check it out. I know Kansas City is currently rebuilding after the pandemic kind of blew up everything for everyone. So we're just starting to get back into a routine of meeting. I think there's quarterly meetups right now, but a lot of the major cities across the globe actually have a DevOps Days community. So you might go and check out DevOpsDays.org and see if there's a community near you and get plugged in.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been checking them out. There are quite a few. Unfortunately, in my local area, there isn't one. And the reason I was curious, I thought I'm in the Bay Area, like why wouldn't you have a DevOps Days community? But the reason is DevOps Days are supposed to be spaced out so that they're no closer than a 2-hour flight from each other. So then that way everyone has one, I guess, designated to your general geographic area.
I did not know that. You would think
Yeah,
something as tightly clustered as the Bay Area, though, would be an exception to that rule.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like if anything's going to be an exception, that should be it. But I guess we have LA and Seattle. So I think those are probably each like hour and a half flights from Bay Area. So I guess that's where we're supposed to go.
Well, Natalie, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what you do, and maybe even something you do for fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Natalie Lunbeck. I work at Shipyard. We're an ephemeral environments startup. And right now I'm based out of SF. And I do a bunch of things at Shipyard. I do like integrations, development, documentation, content, and speaking. And for fun, one of the things why I have this home setup here is I'm actually a volunteer DJ for a community radio station. And I every Monday morning I have a radio show that I do for 2 hours, and I just play some of my favorite like independent label guitar-based music. And so that's been a huge hobby of mine for I've had this show for 4 years, and I've been doing DJing for 5 years. And then in my
Well,
free
that's so
time, I
cool.
also yeah, no, it's been really cool. It's something that I very much look forward to, and it's nice to have like a non-work related side project to keep me excited about something that I love, which is the music industry and
Hmm.
local scene.
So years ago, before I had kids, I was actually a up and coming lighting designer here in Kansas City. So I'd go to concerts and festivals, and I'd set up and run lighting on the stage. It was kind of funny because I love music, adore it. There's hardly a genre that I won't listen to at least a little bit. And so during that time, I listened to all kinds of music. Got to interact with names big and small, from local Kansas City guys that just hang out and play music to some big named country artists and some pretty cool cover bands as well. But it was kind of funny because modern lighting design uses a lot of the same technologies that a basic IT network will use. So it's like it was like an adjacent hobby to my day job at the time.
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like there is so much overlap, like the type of technical hardware stuff that is often like surprisingly underrepresented. You don't really see a lot of people having that crossover, but I think that it's such like a important kind of interdisciplinary relationship right there. It's super cool. That's I imagine that Kansas City. I mean, I was there for the first time in May at DevOps Days, but it seems like the type of place that would have an incredible music scene.
It is. It's one of the fastest growing music scenes in the United States, and gosh, I used to know the statistics. We were like third or fourth behind some of the obvious ones like New York and Nashville, and but Kansas City was one of the fastest growing scenes. You can go out, you can go to downtown Kansas City and catch different music each night. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, that's really incredible. Well, I'm hoping, fingers crossed for DevOps Days, Kansas City next year, and getting to explore the city more and seeing that because that sounds like an incredible thing to be there for.
Yeah, a lot of awesome culture. And if you're listening to this and you happen to stop by Kansas City, feel free to reach out and give me a shout. I'm always happy to take folks to dinner, and I mean that's kind of why I do these podcasts, is it gives me an excuse to network with folks. So um, that's how Natalie and I kind of got connected and decided to do a podcast episode. But why don't we dive into our topic today? Uh, I could talk about music and technology and travel all day long, but should probably stay true to the topic title. So you and I met at DevOps Days, and you had not just the company you work for, but also you seem to have a very special place in your tech heart, I guess, for ephemeral environments. So why don't we level set with the audience here and define what is an ephemeral environment?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Great way to kick this off. So typically, like when we're talking about ephemeral environments, I guess like until recently, there wasn't a lot of non-internal content. No one had like a set definition, but a lot of these orgs kind of have this internal understanding of what constitutes it. So over the past few years, we've just been kind of trying to figure out like what should an ephemeral environment have at minimum that distinguishes it from a static staging environment or a test environment, and what are best practices to kind of justify the technical effort that it might take to implement such a system. So typically, like at least like when I'm talking about ephemeral environments, I'm talking about environments that are short-lived, on demand, but they're full stack copies of your app. They're as production-like as possible. They should have pretty similar production like test data, so then that way you can get realistic. You want to make sure that your database is pretty well approximated for realistic testing, because one of the big use cases for them is end-to-end testing before staging, and often before production as well. You'll
At
also
least
be
we hope
sharing
it's
a lot of.
before production.
Oh, we hope it's perfect. I know that that's a controversial thing. I know that there's smart ways to do it, but I'm afraid to share too many opinions there.
So short-lived, as close to
Sure.
production as possible. Um, so what's kind of gotten Shipyard and yourself interested in ephemeral environments? What was there some sort of market situation that came up? Was it just kind of right time, right place? What's really pushing ephemeral environments right now?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and I think that it's kind of been the ephemeral environments are often a lift to implement, and I think that's something that we see really large orgs have entire DevOps teams, infrastructure teams dedicated to building these out in-house. And this is obviously great because if you talk to a developer at Facebook or Google or Apple, they'll say like, "Oh yeah, like of course I have that. I have this. I can anytime I create a feature or need to solve a bug, I have the infrastructure right there when I need it." But for the rest of us, people at large orgs, medium, even small orgs, don't quite have those opportunities. So companies like Shipyard exist like as a service to offload your environment management. So, like for example, just like a quick pitch, Shipyard, what we do is we take your existing Git repository. If you have a Docker Compose file, that's what we recommend. But also we work with Kubernetes YAML, and we take that and we spin up, we transpile it into Kubernetes, and we spin up your application in ephemeral environments. And it's super fast. It happens within minutes. It's usually triggered at the pull request level, and then you're able to interact with the environment, run your test suite against it, and then spin it down once you're done with it. So just kind of like finding the gap that there are never enough staging or test environments to go around when you're working with static infrastructure. And I'm sure that you have a lot to say about that as well, because that's such a famous pain point.
Oh,
But
I promised you a story, and so I was probably a systems administrator for close to 10 years, probably 8 of which dedicated to Linux. And I'm sure I speak for a lot of people out there when I say that my experience with non-production environments was even non-prod is production for a sysadmin. You've got a lot of times, depending on where I was at, I'd have dev, test, stage, DR, and prod. And all of those had to be up all the time. Um, Depending on where I was at or what point in the quarter we were in, would determine how available dev was to be taken down and worked on and had maintenance carried out. But you never knew who was using it. Dev could be pushing a new feature, stage could be doing a load test, so you could never just take an environment down or even part of an environment. So a lot of times I had to create yet another environment, which we usually affectionately called the sandbox, um, to to test out new patches, to run updates, to build scripts against. Our production environments were never, uh, you never touch production because everyone's afraid to, but you also never touch non-production, which was incredibly painful as a sysadmin. Uh, so creating yet another environment was oftentimes required. The problem was those were usually very small, very underpowered virtual machines, and production at the time was usually bare metal racks upon racks of Dell PowerEdge servers or HP Blade chassis. So it was never like for like, especially if you had like driver updates or something. You never knew what you're getting into until you actually took that outage. It was incredibly painful.
Yeah.
So one of the things that has kind of grown up since then is not just virtual machines, and now we can just spin up as many VMs as we want, and we've thankfully gotten past the time in the IT industry where um, people believed that certain workloads would never be virtualized. Um, Gosh, those conversations were always frustrating. My database can't be in a VM. Why? Well, it just can't. Anyway, that's probably a different topic for a different day. But we'll have to have an episode where I bring on sysadmins and we can just relish in the pain of the past. But one of the trends that has spun up is the cloud, and that's been something that wasn't as prevalent before I moved out of IT operations. So I imagine with ephemeral environments, you're looking at a lot of cost savings. I mean, you talked about spinning up based on a pull request, so a lot of CI pipelines probably utilize ephemeral environments. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of, at least like when I'm using ephemeral environments, that's one of the most valuable use cases that I find personally. And yeah, the cost savings are huge because when you have the entire life cycle ideally is automated. So they're triggered by Git hooks, Git events. Sometimes that's a pull request, sometimes that's a push, and they should stay up to date with your single source of truth repository. And that way you're only using them for, I mean, when you have a test environment, like you can probably tell me like how long you need it, but oftentimes like I only need it for maybe at most an hour or two. I need enough time to run my automated tests, and I need enough time to, poke around, test things manually, just make sure everything's looking up to spec. But when you have a static environment, that's up 24/7. It's extremely expensive, and you're not even really getting your full value out of that because everyone is waiting for it. There's a lot of time that it's not being used, but then like, during the 40-hour work week, it's always in demand. It can never like really serve its purpose. You're not really getting a great return on it. So when you do like the quick like napkin math, you find out with ephemeral environments, you can have more environments and still save about 70% on your cloud costs. Of course, varies company to company depending on what workflow you're using. But yeah, there's huge value in having environments only as long as you need them. And I think that alone justifies implementing such a system for many people.
Well, this would be huge for not only my fellow sysadmins, but for developers as well. I mean, you could really start to build out some of the best practices within IT operations. I mean, think about infrastructure as code, especially if you're on a cloud provider like AWS or even DigitalOcean or some of the others that are out there. Spin up, you can use API calls or scripts or Cloud Init to spin up your exact infrastructure, and you can test that as many times as you need to until you get that golden image, and then commit all that code into GitHub or GitLab, former GitLabber. So it'd be GitLab for me, but but then you hand over those images over to your development team, and they can spin up as many environments as they want. Meanwhile, the sysadmin can continue to iterate. So maybe we've gotten a base image. Now we want to create an image specific to database workloads, or maybe this image needs to have certain either healthcare or credit card security requirements, thinking about things like PCI DSS or HIPAA or a countless number of others that you can start to build multiple golden images and get to this point where your developers can pick that image and then iterate on that even further from Python applications to Postgres databases to whatever the case may be, and really just start iterating on that and not step on each other's toes while you're trying to work through that process.
Well, I really appreciate that. That's a very valuable anecdote for me, just hearing the IT sysadmin perspective of it all. And I think that it just goes without saying that we keep finding more and more ways to use these by the day. So absolutely, very very valuable. And I think that that's yeah
You
that's
can
one of
have that
the.
one for free.
Oh, thank you. No, I will. Gonna write that down. But yeah, that is something that we've been trying to. When we're explaining the value, we say that one of the other big aspects of that is the collaboration and the shareability, like that you're able to these. They're not meant for wide audiences, obviously, but you're able to share them within teams, within pairs of people. If you have something that you need to run by, if you're working like developer sysadmin collaborations, you're able to kind of bring each other in and have shared access in a much easier way than you would with a static environment.
So we actually have a mutual friend that we made at DevOps Days KC. His name's Nathan, and you'd mentioned that you wanted to talk a little bit about DORA.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as just to recap, Nathan Harvey, he's from Google Cloud, and he works on the DORA team, DevOps Research and Assessment, and he gave a really incredible presentation, Decade of DORA at DevOps Days, Kansas City, and that was a great primer on DORA metrics have been around for 10 years, and they've been one of the like de facto ways that orgs are measuring their delivery performance performance, not just their performance, but also their quality. And then these metrics also translate into the well-being of your team, because when your developers are pushing faster, they're facing less burnout, less frustrations, and quality is intrinsically tied to that, so that goes up as well. So I wanted to talk a
So
little bit.
you may not,
Yeah.
sorry to jump in here. You may not know of Nathan Harvey or the DORA team, but I'm pretty sure if you have any interest in deployment and velocity and agile and any of those things, you've probably read a lot of their work. This team was part of the DevOps annual DevOps report, and I think that split off to a different team, but they still do a lot of their own analyses and have some best practice guides and that kind of thing. So even if you've never heard of DORA directly, because up until DevOps Days KC, I hadn't either, but having been formerly at GitLab and then working pretty closely with the developers team at Red Hat, I do spend a lot of time looking at those reports to see what are the pain points. So definitely check out the annual State of DevOps reports. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, those reports are incredible. I found some, just like when I've been doing my own personal research, trying to find out like what are the pain points with infrastructure development. There have been some, yeah, absolutely great content there. And then also, if you're looking for a really thorough research resource that touches lightly, but is very easy to navigate. The DORA.dev website has a great capabilities library of all these different things that you can implement. Everything from like continuous integration to flexible infrastructure. Also, like a lot of proper team practices. Really good stuff there. But yeah, I wanted to talk about, I think that one of the greatest things about ephemeral environments is, I know, as we both know, DORA isn't something you really change overnight. It's kind of a long tail effort. There's a lot that goes into it, but we kind of found a way that ephemeral environments are probably, I'm obviously a little biased, but they are one of the faster ways you can move your DORA metrics. And do you mind if I give a quick recap of the 4 key metrics?
Sure.
Yeah, so the 4 metrics are deployment frequency, which is how often you push to production, lead time for changes, which is the time, I believe, from which you sit down to write a feature to when it actually hits production. Change failure rate, which is how often one of your deployments causes a regression, and then the time to restore service, which is if there is a regression or failure or bug, how quickly can you remediate that? And obviously, this is a great resource for not just your efficiency, but also just the quality of your deployments. And I think it's really cool that you're able to distill this down so quickly, especially to something that you can kind of get a ballpark estimate of in less than a minute. They have a great tool on their website for assessing that. But we found out that ephemeral environments are huge impact for all of these, because a lot of this, a lot of the blockers that prevent people from having, what do they call it? Like elite DORA metrics? Is that the top performing term?
Right.
A lot of this happens, infrastructure availability, and I feel like you can probably relate to this, but teams that have true flexible infrastructure, according to the DORA Metrics website, are 23 times more likely to be top performers in DORA, which means that they don't have that human factor. They don't have that, people don't have to knock on IT's door and say, hey, I need the environment right now. The environment's just there when they need it. And that cuts out, obviously, days, sometimes weeks of lead time. If you're able to make that infrastructure jump, you're able to write a feature and test it like right on the spot as soon as you're done developing it. And then if you do uncover any bugs in your tests, you're able to remediate them right on the spot and run your tests again, like absolutely no downtime. So you can see how that kind of impacts all 4 of those, and you end up really cutting a ton of time out, especially when you're able to And I like to say, like, you're getting the full value out of your CI/CD pipeline. You've spent a lot of time perfecting it. You've spent a lot of time perfecting your entire test suite. But what value is it if you're running it like maybe 10% of how often you could be running it?
Hmm. So it's almost like there's a method to the madness. We could actually game the system a little bit.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, that's like, I think it's very, it's nice to know. It's nice to know that DORA metrics aren't something that you have to, dedicate 6 months of dedicated engineering lift and major budget to resolve. I know that it's on paper it can be tricky, but it's great to know that you have yeah, something you can absolutely at least improve the general developer experience with, which in turn will have such a positive impact.
Hmm. So I wanna kind of bring this back down to earth a little bit. We've kind of talked about what ephemeral environments are. We've talked about a little bit about how they might have changed, like my experience, and I'm sure that that experience exists for a lot of other folks. So we've kind of talked in the hypothetical, and then we touched on how do you measure the success of deploying ephemeral environments. But what do you have any examples? Do you have anything solid, concrete that you can point to and show that yeah, this worked?
Yeah, so absolutely. So when people are asking me, like, what are some real world examples? Like, what are some companies that use ephemeral environments and have talked about them? I like to talk about Uber's internal solution, which they have a great article on their engineering blog, and it's called SLATE, which stands for Short Lived Application Testing Environments. And SLATE is essentially, it exists to run tests earlier, more often, and also give developers power over these environments instead of, kind of throwing code over the wall, having this all wait till staging. They're able to kind of iterate, find bugs where they happen, and I mean, I know that this is another controversial thing, but shift ownership left, which has been yeah, very very valuable. But I will provide the link for that. That was a super valuable article, and just showing that this is what these orgs who have the time and resources, they recognize the value, they recognize just the huge improvement to developer experience, and they have implemented such systems. And honestly, like, as someone who talks a lot about ephemeral environments, it's super valuable and reassuring for me to see that this is having such great attention in the engineering world.
Hmm. So are you said Uber, which is kind of on that list of tech companies that a lot of people look at as unicorns, and I think like the other example that comes to mind is like Netflix and chaos engineering. A lot of those big tech companies that have really made a splash in the industry. Um, but I think we can kind of get caught up in the hype of their story, and I imagine there's some misconceptions that creates.
Yes, and I think that, in terms of, misconceptions, I think that, one of the biggest ones that I see is there's a lot of buzz right now around, CDEs, cloud development environments, and a lot of times when I'm talking about ephemeral environments, someone might ask like, "Oh, like GitHub Codespaces," and I
Mm,
I wanna articulate that GitHub Codespaces, Gitpod, Daytona, they're all incredible pieces of software, and they do absolutely have a place in the development lifecycle. But you're using them for development, for iteration. So, what the important thing is that you have your maybe your local dev environment for. I mean, I develop locally. Maybe you then start working on when you need additional services, integrations, compute. You iterate in your cloud dev environment, and at the pull request level, we like to say that ephemeral environments are post commit environments. So they're typically
mm,
when you're done iterating. At that point, then you would bring your testing earlier, distribute them out to your team, any shareholders, anyone who might need to do code review or product review. At that point, that's when you bring ephemeral environments into the equation. So the great thing is these tools all work together, but there is an important distinct difference in that yeah, you use them together. And then also, like, if something goes wrong, if you do uncover a bug in your ephemeral environment, you should be able to remediate that then and there, and it should rebuild very quickly.
Hmm. So putting myself back into the position of someone who doesn't work for one of the big unicorns, um, I don't. I would be terrified to start this process. That is just there's so much to build, and we've thrown out so many different concepts from, uh, uh, environments on bill or on push or on pull, infrastructure as code, cloud-based environments. I mean, just all these things. This is probably breaking my brain at the moment. But it looks like Shipyard started a website a few years ago that can kind of help build out this process.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started at Shipyard back in 2021, like I said earlier, there weren't a ton of non-internal resources. Like a lot of companies do have great internal documentation on doing this. A lot of that is me speculating that they do, because everyone you talk to from a large org is like, oh yeah, this is how you do this, this, and this. But there was really limited public-facing content, so that was difficult for me during onboarding to join this company and not have a solid enough understanding going in to my interviews, to my to just starting my job, about what our main product was. So I talked with some of my team members, and we realized that there's this huge gap. Why don't we talk from our own personal experiences at Shipyard, what we're trying to solve for, and make this public open source resource guide, ephemeralenvironments.io. And you can check it out. That's the link, ephemeralenvironments.io. You can also try .com. And we kind of established the 6 pillars that ephemeral environments should have at a minimum if you're building them from scratch. And I think that this has been really a really incredible learning experience for me, just kind of finding, like, if you are architecting a system, you want to make sure that you're fulfilling certain requirements for both your developers, but also not just those, but your product, your QA, and I mean, as you were saying, your IT and sysadmins. So just making sure that if you are making this investment, that you're hitting all the major pain points and you're getting your money's worth, and also, yeah, doing it the right way.
Hmm. So in ephemeral this is a good chance to point out that when the show goes live, there will be links to not only Natalie's work, but some of the topics that we've mentioned, as well as chapter markers. So if you want to go back and kind of finish the episode, then maybe review what we were talking about around DORA metrics, that kind of thing, makes it easy to bounce around. So definitely check out the show notes. That's your free PSA for this episode. At least with ephemeralenvironments.io, you don't have to start this process from scratch. It kind of gives you some guidelines, some ideas, maybe cast a little vision, and probably make it easier to start this process. So when you and I talked, we didn't want to promote your employer so much as just kind of identify something that you were passionate about. And when you're giving your talk at DevOps Days, you really lit up when you mentioned minimal viable CD. That this wasn't something you did for your day job, but it was more of a passion project. And so while my passion project is talking, um, um, you're a major contributor to this. So why don't you tell us a bit about minimum viable CD and what it's trying to solve?
Yeah, well, thank you. I really appreciate this. Unfortunately, I wish I could say I'm a major contributor. I've written one page on it, which I'm very happy about. It was production like test environments, but someday I'm hoping to be a more major contributor. But I can absolutely dream. But this was a project. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. It's a project that I respect a lot. And when anyone asks me, like, how can I improve my CI/CD processes, or what might be what's a great resource that you have for CI/CD? This is always, like, first and foremost the first thing that I show them. And this was started by Brian Finster a few years ago. And when I spoke to him about it, I believe that he said it started as some internal documentation that he and his team had written, kind of setting the expectations for what your CI/CD should do at minimum, because this is something that, again, like with ephemeral environments, nobody has really been able to agree upon. There's a lot of disagreement, like what your CI/CD should do, because in theory, you could have a CI/CD pipeline, but not be doing CI/CD by definition,
Right.
which I'm sure you've seen that quite a bit. And I really like this guide. It's very, very opinionated. I think it's very, it's something for all orgs to aspire to. It talks a lot about what you need in order to do CI/CD the right way, and one of those things is trunk-based development. So ideally, you should be, working off of really short-lived branches, pushing to main, ideally like multiple times per day, and then CI/CD is kind of an applied version of that. So if and one of the prerequisites, which I think is so cool, it really ties back so well to ephemeral environments, is when you have your branches, you should be testing them before merging to main and then testing after. And there's kind of an issue there, because you realize, okay, well, if I want to test my branch before main, I can do that in staging, but then that might not be less than a day of lead time. That could be a few days if I have a decent sized team. But if I want to maintain status as true CI/CD, I'm going to need a disposable on-demand environment at that point in time. So I like to say that, if you want to do CI/CD the right way, it's very smart to implement ephemeral environments, because you're able to test things right then and there, have that lead time of less than a day, and continue pushing without that, without those blockers to your staging environments, or excessive human factors that might slow you down.
And I think about this problem again from kind of the operations side, where kind of one of the goals, one of the I don't know, one of the facets of IT operations that many people strive for is, if you have to log into production, you failed. I don't know about failed. I don't agree with that sentiment, but I definitely agree with the concept behind it, that you don't want to have to touch production. You should have enough automation, monitoring, and proactive management tools in place that you don't have to shouldn't have to log in, but for the most critical of changes. And having a true CI/CD pipeline would help you get there. Now, I caveat all of that with the fact that no one is ever going to achieve 100% of any of these concepts. We've talked about AI on the show. We've talked about CI/CD pipelines. We've talked about DevOps. We're talking about ephemeral environments. And looking at these ideas, while it would be great if we lived in a world where my ops guys didn't have to manage dev, test, QA, production, staging, DR, DR2, all these other environments, but just basically have production and ephemeral environments. I don't know of anyone who has, like, quote, arrived. I don't think there is a finish line. I think every time you come into work, every time you log in, you look at your environment and go, what change can I make? What piece of my job can I automate? What can I build that will make my developers' lives easier? Or what monitoring piece or what automation can I build into my environment so that I'm not getting paged out at 2 a.m? Some might say I'm lazy, but I just like my sleep. Getting paged out is not something I'm interested in.
No, absolutely not at all. So I mean, it is great when you're able to kind of, increase or decrease the possibility of something going wrong with just bugs going through a lot more exposure than they normally would. And of course, like, it is something like you said, it's something that you can't, getting these things done 100% of the way can be absolutely daunting, if not impossible, for the vast majority of us. But I think that when you're able to solve for 70% of it, you see the quality of life improvements. You see that you're not getting paged at 2 a.m. You're seeing fewer bugs in production just because every single bug that might have occurred has at least been tested in isolation, so you can quickly and easily narrow down to where it has come from. But I do think that there is just a lot of value in doing this. And then also just I really like this, the idea of leading your team with kind of a mindset of continuous improvement and just realizing kind of benchmarking that. You can benchmark that with DORA, and then it gives you kind of goals to work towards. And of course, the elite metrics are absolutely very difficult, but you can say hey, if I cut this out here, automate this, have an environment here or there for these people, I can get a little bit closer to where I want to be. And it makes it a little bit less intimidating of a lift.
Oh, for sure. So we could go on all afternoon, but in fact, there was an entire section about developer experience we didn't get to, but I, I, I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I wanna kind of capitalize on our conversation here. If we've and I mean, this episode is even called, a quick look at ephemeral environments. So what if where should people go if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, I'd love to say go to ephemeralenvironments.io. And also, we're always looking for contributors. So we also have a GitHub. It's github.com/ephemeralenvironments/ephemeral environments. So if you have content that you'd love to contribute on ephemeral environments, yeah, absolutely. Please let me know. You can also email me, Natalie@shipyard.build, and I'm always happy to talk about that. And then, of course, we just talked about minimum CD. So that's minimumcd.org. That's also an open source community project. And the team there is, they're some really incredible maintainers. They're always happy to help you talk through your content contributions. And I know that, yeah, really, really wonderful people to work with. And then I think this goes without saying, but Dora.dev, I love this site. There are so many guides on it, so much great stuff, and also just a great way to benchmark your org's current performance. Yeah, I think that about covers it for what I have. Do you have any resources?
I've never had a guest ask me that before. I kind of circled back to the DevOps conversation we had at the beginning. DevOps Days is an amazing group of folks. I feel like probably next to my Linux Fest crowd that I only see once or twice a year at a Linux Fest somewhere in the country. The DevOps community is probably one of my favorites to spend time with. Sorry, one of the three pillars of the show is Linux, and we've hardly mentioned it, so I had to sneak that in there. But
yeah.
the DevOps Days community is amazing. I feel like I have a DevOps family, people that I only see at conferences. I mean, there's a couple of folks that even live here in Kansas City, and I still only see them when I travel to a show. So it's really a tight-knit group of people, and they're welcoming and friendly. So if you're not involved in the DevOps Days community, highly encourage you to do so. So Natalie, you and I have been connected for a few months, and you post on LinkedIn from all over the place. So you do a lot of traveling. Where's the best way for people to get in touch?
Yeah, so I think in terms of getting in touch, I don't have a Linktree or a Twitter, but I'm realizing after that would be nice. But you can look me up on LinkedIn, Natalie Lunbeck, Lunbeck. And you can also reach me by email, Natalie@shipyard.build. And I check those fairly frequently. So I'm always happy to be in touch. But yeah, always happy to talk. And this has been really incredible. Thank you so much, Eric, for thinking of me for this. And I'm really glad we get to continue the conversation we started at DevOps Days. That was a really, really great event, and it was awesome to meet you there.
Yeah, it was a great time. Really, really a lot of conversations. And you mentioned Linktree. I just set up one right after the conference. My previous guest, Laura Santamaria, was there from Dell, and she and I got talking about DevOps and how it's a people problem, not a tool problem. So catch episode 5. She actually turned me on to Linktree, and so now I use it wherever I go. So yeah. I don't know about Twitter, but definitely Linktree is a great tool. So yeah, I think Nathan's going to be on the show to talk about DORA here in the near future. You connected me with one of your folks at Shipyard to have an episode, so I'm getting excited because uh, uh, episode 7 is kind of the magic number for podcasts. If you make it past 7 episodes, you've kind of arrived. So one more to go, and I've still got content and guests lined up, including one of the members of the Matrix Foundation to talk about Matrix and Element as sort of a non-proprietary communications platform. Gosh, I've got 4 or 5 episodes in my back pocket, and looking forward to bringing those to you all. So on behalf of my guest, I'm forgetting to say something. See, that's why I have an episode guide. So if you just cannot get enough of my sad stories and my pathetic sense of humor, you can also catch me on the Fedora podcast. I'll be live here in a few days to talk about bootc, which is bootable containers. Might actually be interesting, Natalie, for you to check that out from an ephemeral environment perspective. Basically being able to build out an operating system within a container and then just basically distribute that operating system as if it were a container image. Might be interesting. So that'll be on the Fedora podcast. Next episode of this show will be in 2 weeks, most likely. I don't have a guest nailed down just yet. It's kind of weird time of year with everyone going back to school, but also live on Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents over there on the RHEL YouTube channel. So plenty of places to get connected with me. If you need those links, just go to itguyeric.com. And Natalie, once again, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate your time, and like you said, continuing our conversation from our conference here in KC.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. This has been a pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to catching more of your episodes.
Well, next episode you can skip because you kind of know the content. But for those of you that have made it this far, thank you very much for watching or listening. Head over to my YouTube channel, or you can grab the show anywhere that you can get audio podcasts. I'm still working on some of the infrastructure, still thinking about maybe shortening up the intro or trying to get some background graphics, just little tweaks here and there. I'm, kind of like DevOps, I'm never going to arrive at my ideal podcast, but I got to tell you, it's kind of breaking off and doing my own show has really been kind of a boost that I needed. So I'm really excited to do these episodes. I just, once I ship my kids off to college, maybe I can do a weekly show. But until then, we'll be back in 2 weeks. So on behalf of my guest, Natalie Lunbeck, and myself, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, thank you for joining us, and we will see you again next time.